Is this your association? You got magazines, you got lanyards, you got lunch sponsors, but you're not sure if you should start adding digital inventory to your media kit. What if you make twice the amount of inventory and sponsors buy the same amount they were going to spend anyway? Doubling your efforts and keeping your non-dues revenue the same. Well, this episode's for you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Association Amplified podcast, where we explore solutions to bridge the member value gap, the biggest threat to associations today. All right, and today we are joined once again with Randall Mauricio, CEO at Worker Bee TV. I'm really excited for this one. Randall, today we're going to be talking all about sponsorship and sponsors' appetites for digital offerings. And moreover, do these new offerings, do they compete with our traditional models of opportunities we create for the sponsors to engage with us?
This is a challenge that I encounter often in dealing with our clients. And, I have north of 15 years hearing from and hearing from association professionals. And so this one is it's one that I've heard many, many times. And it typically goes something like this. But if I introduce this digital offering, our sponsors will buy it. Good problem. And therefore, it'll cannibalize the dollars that typically would have gone to X, Y, Z, which is natural. And guess what? I wish I had a silver bullet for you. Is that risk founded? Is it warranted? And is it real? Yeah, absolutely. But Marcus, you know me. I love analogies. So let me hit you with an analogy and then we'll dig in. Chicago Bulls comes to mind, right? And yeah, when you think of Chicago Bulls, you think of the star player that is Michael Jordan. And perhaps if I were to reflect that to an association, perhaps your Michael Jordan is your magazine. And you don't want to cannibalize the productivity that your magazine has or that Michael Jordan has. But guess what? To get to that championship, that team, that franchise could not rely only on Michael Jordan. They needed to introduce new offerings, other star players such as the Dennis Rodmans, such as the Scottie Pippens. And once those additions were made, guess what happened to the suite of offerings? Guess what happened to the dynamic within that team? They went from a good team with a star player to a great team winning the championships. And so, yes, I'm chock full of analogies, but that's the one that came to mind, because if Michael Jordan is your magazine, don't rely on just your magazine. You have to expand your horizons. I definitely see over the years that associations have found and have a lot of comfort with their flagship offerings. And maybe that's you. Maybe that is the magazine, or maybe that's your newsletter. And you might be trigger shy with injecting new digital offerings. But I would dare say this: if you do not introduce those new offerings, would you potentially have all eggs in one basket? And if the market continues to evolve and the market continues to saturate with competition, what's stopping the other association from doing what you're afraid to do? And all of a sudden, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, opening up their Rolodex of a full digital suite plus all the legacy items, what's stopping them from now cannibalizing your offering or your set of offerings? And so from a competitive standpoint, there is a business case to be made.
Yeah, ultimately where I land first on this is that, hey, we're living in a time where there are more digital options for buyers than ever before. Surprise, surprise. And the digital inventory is just growing more and more sophisticated. And companies are under more pressure from their CFOs to, hey, you can't just have the piggy bank. Like, you got to justify these ad dollars, right? I can't give you another 40 grand to run a campaign. And what does that really translate to is that marketers are under more and more pressure to deliver tangible results, either in direct ROI, ever increasingly so, but it needs to trickle back into some sort of strategy in a purely analytical way.
So. And I would dare say, who are you ultimately serving, or what are you ultimately serving? Does your association exist? Does your function exist to serve the P&L? If yes, then yeah, go manage the revenue that you're going to get from your legacy items. But if your, and I hope this is the answer, if your purpose is to serve the member and be fully member focused and member centric, then I advise that you remain open to digital offerings. I'll give you an example. 10, 15 years ago, I think I mentioned this to you earlier, the whole notion of print is dying, print is going to be dead. And what did we find out many years down the road? No, print didn't die. It just took on a different purpose within a whole Rolodex of other offerings, right? As new technology, new and other mediums and formats emerged, yeah, there's a smaller share of wallet, but it doesn't mean that print or the magazine is no longer needed. And the example I often like to share is, if you don't have a cell phone or if you don't have a screen in front of you as you're sitting down on an airplane, gosh, that magazine looks pretty good, doesn't it? Because it's the only form of media that you have available to you. So in that scenario, in that use case, yeah, that magazine is very valuable. And so it's just a matter of adapting to the times. And I would also share this. Back to my commentary about, why do you as an organization or as a professional stand to exist? Who or what are you serving? How do your members prefer to receive content these days? Do they only want print magazines, or do they want the digital formats? And I think everybody knows that that's a no-brainer. That's a rhetorical question. But I'll answer this question. Why? Why is that expectation there? Simple. Technology makes it easy. If you're a time-starved professional like me, would you rather spend 30 minutes sifting through a magazine to find the answer, or log on to Google, log on to your phone, and just type in, what is the answer to my problem? I'd rather do the latter. And so, again, the content hasn't changed. The need for the content hasn't changed, but the way in which you deliver that content to your members and prospective members, that absolutely has changed. And if you're not on the bandwagon, then you're not really keeping up with the times.
Yeah. So if we go back to, are we growing the pie, or are we just moving dollars around? I think about it this way. If we look at the opportunities that we have for sponsors and we categorize them into advertising, which I would describe that as simple brand awareness opportunities. So going back to magazines, hey, here's your logo. It's not a full page spread. It's not a double page spread. It's a little advertisement in the corner. People are going to know that you exist. That's lower down on the totem pole of value propositions for buyers these days. Now, there's a digital opportunity for that too. Well, you can put a logo on your website, and you can say to a potential sponsor, your logo will get this many eyeballs in and around. Ratcheting up from that, we have general sponsorships, right? I am going to sponsor this initiative, this modality of communication, right? Where we create more of an opportunity to not only have the brand awareness, but facilitate at least some level of message from that sponsor. Thirdly, content marketing, which is the biggest opportunity for revenue dollars, right? So if it's either in a traditional form or in a digital form, content marketing would be, all right, sponsor, not only are people going to know who you are, but I'm going to give you enough real estate where you can actually display your competency by not only just saying some brand messaging, but you're going to be able to, I'm going to give you enough real estate where you can speak about something, right? So for instance, in a traditional sense, if we're talking about publications, this would be an opportunity for the sponsor to, write an article, right? But in a traditional, or in a digital method rather, we would actually facilitate the sponsor to come on and be a subject matter expert in the thing that they specialize and use them as a resource. Now, why do I unpack all that? I simply look at it this way. If we think that we're not growing the pie, I think there's something quite illogical about that, because if we can take that pie and we can basically cut it in half, and we have our more traditional options with advertising, and then we have digital, how is it that we're going to come to a place thinking that in today's environment, with all the inventory available to buyers, that they are going to be taking out Facebook ads, LinkedIn ads, Google search? They have all that at their fingertips. But when they assess your proposition to them, that you're going to convert someone that's very digital focused, and you're going to convert them to more of your way of doing things. So just with that one example, I'm pretty bullish on that. Yes, it does grow the pie. And to summarize that, it would be that it allows you to have a proposition for a buyer where they are focused on digital, and you're not convincing them that, hey, your magazine gets a lot of circulation. Because if that buyer is saying, okay, great, but I want the receipts, right? Going back to that example of what marketers today are expected to deliver to their stakeholders in terms of data, if without the digital options, you're just leaving those folks high and dry. That's one way to look at it. So by growing your inventory to include an ever amount of opportunities for digital, you're able to. It'd be like saying, of our membership base at our association, and we look at our segments, we're just going to cut them in half, and we're going to only niche down, and we're going to serve a smaller segment of our members, and we're going to be in a better position for it. You want to make yourself as appealing as possible to all sorts of buyers, so that they could pick and choose and blend what they purchase from you to meet their objectives.
There's my mind's going, because there's so many ways that I can cut this cookie, but I want to build on everything that you just said there. From a rudimentary, very, very basic rudimentary perspective, if your offering is analog and you're shopping this analog offering to your sponsors, you actually don't know. There's a data dead end there. If you're reliant on a print magazine, and by the way, there's nothing wrong with a print magazine. That is part of the communications mix. All I'm trying to say simply is, if you're dependent on a single print magazine publication, how do you really know, or do you really know that article, the content that are in that magazine, the pieces of advertising, or perhaps the content marketing, as you had mentioned, that you're writing in your magazine, how do you know that it's actually being consumed? You have a measure for distribution size. Yes, you know that the publisher has sent it out. How do you know it actually got delivered? And so many years ago, this is the impetus towards associations moving in a mass matter, their magazines onto the digital platform, right? And that is a start. But I often find myself questioning, is that digital magazine in a format that your members actually want to consume it in? Right. Because at the end of the day, it's a lot of pages, right? You're telling me that I'm going to sit down here with my iPad or on my laptop and comb through 100 pages or 50 pages. Maybe, maybe not. And again, I'll go back to my disclaimer. There's nothing wrong with a print magazine. It is part of a healthy communications and marketing mix. Mm-hmm. But the point I'm really trying to make, and you touched on it, is there's a business case for your advertisers and for your sponsors. They want to know, they want access to what the digital platforms can offer. And that boils back down to data. And I would dare say that there's two forms of data. There's data that is bare bones basic, like the page views, how many impressions, that's important. The next layer of data I would call is insights, like true stories that the data is communicating to you. Because you go to you get basic data, great, but unless you process it and really dig deep to understand what is happening in the market, then you have a bunch of figures that you can't really act on. So what do I mean by insights? I'm trying to think of a useful example here. Let's just say I'm trying to sell a product or service on a digital platform. And let's just say I spent some money, I have some budget for a banner ad. And let's just say I place these banner ads on a whole host of different mediums. And let's assume that I run a A/B test. Campaign A says that I got 0 impressions and therefore 0 clicks. That tells you a story. Campaign B says, I get 1,000 impressions, but only 500 click-throughs. That's a lot better. I shouldn't have used the word but, because that's actually really good from a conversion standpoint to get 1,000 impressions and 500 click-throughs. Mm-hmm. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's two different stories there. And if you really analyze the insights to what that data is communicating to you, you can make informed business decisions to then refine your campaigns. Take it a step further. If and when somebody clicks through on your banner ad and lands on your landing page and spends, 2 seconds on average before dipping out and leaving, that communicates something. That tells you that there's nothing of value on that landing page. Versus in another campaign, that click-through spends 20 minutes and returns to that landing page after they became aware of it 27 times. That's a whole different story. And so that there's data and then there's insights. And this form of thinking is really something that I gathered and borrowed from a fellow from Google who I met and interviewed many, many years ago at a business conference. At that time, many years ago, here's what he told me. The average touch points on your website right now is 27. 27 times will your prospective buyer or whoever you're trying to market to, they will come back up to 27 times before saying yes. And yes can come in the form of subscribing or come in the form of purchasing your item that you're trying to sell. That's a moot point. That's irrelevant. All I'm saying is 27 times they're going to come back, search for content. They're going to think about it. Hey, I have this question now. I'm going to go back to the website. If they're going to come back to the website, you better hope that you have the content that answers their question and therefore sells your product or offering for you. That was many years ago, that data point of 27 times. I'd be willing to bet there's a good chance that 27 touch points has increased because we're now living in a big data age and also in a content consumption age.
Yeah, I love that. It for me, it really speaks to that a good relationship with a sponsor is one where both parties are able to get enough value where that partnership makes sense. We have to create opportunities where that sponsor is not just going to be one and done. I'm going to sponsor to put, I'm going to give you some money here so my logo can be on your website, or I'm going to sponsor the conference dinner. That's not a relationship. That's a very transactional purchase for that buyer. But in one, which like you were speaking, where they can reliably go through and have those touch points, and we're facilitating that for them. Now you have a relationship with a sponsor where they're getting a much better value proposition. And I suppose to even give it a traditional analogy, it'd be something like having the magazine at your hip and opening the magazine again and again, right? But yeah, I think ultimately it is very much important that the opportunities that we're creating are focused on not only the value that we're giving to the sponsor, but they're able to provide value for the member, right? Having good relationships that are mutually beneficial to the sponsor and the member, because there's that overlap there. They have something to contribute to the space that you're in. And it honestly is what I've seen very underutilized because so much innovation, let's just face it, comes from the private sector. That's where innovation is born by brilliant teams.
And I think you're touching on something that is actually really, really helpful for association professionals today. And that is understanding what it is your sponsors and advertisers actually want. What are their objectives? You raise a good point about logos. Lanyards, right? We all go to these conferences and trade shows, and you see the big logo on the lanyard or up on the big screen. But do we really understand if that's effective? Maybe, maybe not. It depends on what the sponsor and advertiser is looking to do. If they're coming to your event purposely looking for brand awareness, maybe. But if they're purposely looking for sales, then maybe that logo on the lanyard doesn't really communicate their value proposition. So it depends what stage. And so the opportunity here for associations is find out. Do a consultation. And I know we're talking about specifically the risk of cannibalizing sponsor and advertising dollars, but I couldn't let that opportunity pass. There's an opportunity here for associations to figure out exactly what their advertisers and sponsors are looking for. And you can do that in roundtables, get that information via surveys, and then refine your offering so that you're satisfying exactly what it is they're looking for. It's just all about striking alignment. But back to your commentary about building a business case, I would dare say that if you don't transition to digital offerings, you're not truly getting the opportunities and the backing of technology in your corner. Here's what I'm actually talking about. We live in an try saying that 10 times over. We live in an algorithm-driven social media environment. And I know that social media is just one form of a digital platform or digital avenue, but it's a big player. If you're not hosting your content, your digital content on a digital platform, are you truly having access to those insights? There's e-commerce platforms out there. There's content hosting platforms out there that will automatically recommend SEO for you, or I should say keywords. That'll optimize your SEO. You don't have that opportunity in an analog magazine. And so again, the question is, do you have technology on your side? With the growth of AI, all of that I'm talking about is going to become table stakes. And you can either decide to have that technology in your corner or fight against it.
Yeah, for sure. The fighting against it definitely resonates with me. You know, let's attack this from another way. Let's put on our salesman hats here, okay? So we're part of the sales team at ABC Association, and we have a good mix of, you know, what we've been selling for years as part of our annual event and the journal that we put out. Maybe there's several journals that we put over the course of the year, and then we have some opportunities to expand our inventory here and give more options to the buyer in the form of digital. We give them advertising, we give them sponsorship on the website, and then we also include some options for content, meaning that we're going to create content where they will be able to either take a representative from their company and on a level of member value, they're going to contribute to a topic. They're going to bring their expertise and they're going to display that, right, for the membership. Okay, great. Let's just work with that. Very simple. Okay, so I'm talking to someone on the phone here and I'm trying to course out a deal. Is it better for me to be able to have a blend across a full menu, if you will, to meet that buyer? In other words, what are my chances of making that deal larger? Is it by sticking to just having digital or having everything on the menu?
I think I touched on this, but I didn't do a good job of elaborating on it. What is the market looking for? There's going to be buyers out there who are looking for a multimedia package. Then there's going to be some buyers who are not quite comfortable yet, but they're willing to test it out. In either of those situations, I actually don't believe that shying away from change and adopting that shift, that technological shift, is actually a good idea. Because the comment I made, if I didn't make it earlier, if you don't make that change, another association will, and perhaps that association is a competitor to your association, then what? So you got to make that change. But in terms of, I like where you're going with this, because if I were to map out, think through the step 2, 3, 4, 5 of how new digital offerings can shape your offerings, it can take the form of a bundle. But I would dare say that not every association is ready for that yet. And you've heard me say this before: treat your nonprofit like a business. And how would any other business introduce a new offering? they would create a process and stick to it and be so disciplined that they would stick to that process. And I'll ramble here, and I hope this makes sense, but the greats out there, they have a budget for R&D, trying and experimenting something new. And once they create an MVP, they put it out there and test it. And then they collect data. Did it work? What didn't work? How can we improve this? Eventually, they're going to take that little idea into a concept that actually sticks. And once it sticks, that's how you know you're going from an MVP or a minimum viable product or solution into something that can manifest into a legitimate product that you should add to your arsenal. So there's a process to that. And perhaps, there might be an association based on your demographic, based on the appetite, the risk appetite of your membership and your advertiser sponsors. Maybe you want to pour gasoline on that on that process, but maybe you don't. Either way, there's a clear-cut process there, and it's the same one that the private sector has deployed for years. I think back to the giants, the biggest corporations out there. Before Apple released their smartwatch, I reject the notion that they were afraid of the smartwatch cannibalizing the dollars that would go to the smartphone. Right?
Yeah.
They weren't thinking that way. They were simply thinking, we have our flagship product. It came in the form of the iPhone. But what if we introduce this new offering? Test it, put it out there. Let's get the data. The data said, yeah, pour more gasoline. And now what do we have? Do we have people choosing the smartphone instead of the iPhone? No, they're buying it as a bundle. And it's not just those two products, I guarantee you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely love this analogy because, if we stick with the whole phone watch analogy, there are two different products for two different functions, right? And expanding to digital allows you to reinforce the point here made earlier, is that expanding digital just gives you more options, right? And again, you can build out that bundle and create very attractive options where you can check off the objectives, the goals for that buyer, where they can get, say, that blend of brand awareness, right? They're going to get the data, right? They're going to be able to say their message clearly. They're going to be able to say that they've made a good representation inside of ultimately what your association is just an incredible opportunity that I think it's largely undervalued with associations. I feel like we could do a whole episode just on this topic. In a previous life, I was very much a very, let's just say, consistent buyer, right? So I was spending six figures pretty routinely in pay per click. And if I could go back then and tell myself, like, hey, you can take that money and you can serve it directly to your target audience and just not worry about that spillover because of I don't care what platform you are, the targeting is not perfect. Like, that is the magical thing that associations bring to the table when they talk to buyers, is that, hey, sponsor, would you like to advertise to only your target audience? And I could tell you that 100% of your dollars are going exactly to the eyeballs that you want to that's a premium. In my opinion, that's a premium. And the only thing stopping us is just giving them those options that they're looking for.
That's exactly it. It's a decision. And by the way, I get it. There's risk involved. And a viewer or a listener might be listening to us and thinking, well, gee, yeah, easy for you guys to say. You're not actually the ones, taking the heat, sticking your neck out. I get it. Anytime you do something different, there's going to be inherent risk. But unless you do something different, how are you going to know? When what is absolutely certain is sticking to stat quo in an ever-changing market, that is guaranteed going to cause some problems and present its issues down the road. No doubt about it.
What's in the reoccurring top three for any association in terms of priorities?
In terms of getting this done?
In terms of objectives for their year, I would say that revenue is consistently in that top three.
I see where you're going with this. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Revenue is. And I would dare say, based on the feedback that I've gotten from many associations, is to be that authoritative source for content and information. And as I've said many times, if you're not in the right format or in the right vehicle, where your members or sponsors or advertisers expect you to be, will you become that authoritative source? That's going to be really challenging if you're stuck in stat quo and your members and advertisers want you to be somewhere else.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. All right, Randall, as we draw to a close here, is there any final thoughts that you can leave us with?
We've all heard that change is constant. But I think what the association industry can lean into is get comfortable with change management. Because this whole concept that we're talking about of introducing new products and offerings, introducing more digital to your arsenal, I really see that as managing that change, not only to your members but also to your sponsors. Yes, the traditional legacy items is what they're used to, but if you don't make that leap, just think about the chasm that you're creating for yourself because of external influences, competitors, the market becoming more saturated with offerings and products and solutions that you decided to not deploy for your own association. So there's an unnecessary dip, and you can avoid that just by inhibiting this mindset of growth, innovation, and sticking to a process and managing that change, because there's no doubt that it's going to feel a little clumsy. But I always say, if you don't do it, with the risk presented by not doing anything, would that be bigger than actually doing something, right? There's risk in one, in the former. There's upside on the latter.
Set a goal, make a plan, execute, debrief, optimize.
Trust the process.
All right. Thanks, Randall.
Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. That's our show. Thanks for tuning in and joining us today. If you want to learn more about how to amplify your association's relevance and growth, go to workerbee.tv, where you can get more useful insights on bridging the member value gap. Thanks again.